Welcome back to another Chris and Retro. We're doing another Sunday special here, a Signature Moments with Sammy Says. We've done two of these so far, but today we're going to talk about step two. And we've already understood that we're at a crossroads of step one with our recovery. We realized that life was unmanageable. We just couldn't take it anymore. So now what? Now we just moved beyond the crossroads. We realized we got some work to do. And today we're going to talk about step two and what that's all involved with. We're going to share some of the probing questions. I've got a worksheet that I work from here, and Sam and I have been working through this worksheet a little bit, and there's some interesting conversations you got to have yourself as you start to do this work, as well as with your sponsor or whoever else you're doing this work with. But we're going to share some of those questions as well as some of our own personal journey on all that. And so without anything else, let's get started with our signature moments. So today, again, we had a little bit of a problem last two episodes ago with video based on where Sam's located. The Wi-Fi is not that good. So we decided to do one more on the phone here, and we've learned some lessons from the last one. So welcome, Sam.
Hey there, Chris. How are you?
Good. So it's good. We're going to try this again with the kinks that we've worked out last time. But I'm going to show across the bottom here in a banner, step two. So last week we talked about, our life had become unmanageable. We just can't take it anymore. That incomprehensible demoralization of what our addiction has done to us. And it's taken us to a place where life is complete freaking chaos and we've got no more control. So we understood that. We asked ourselves a lot of questions, and we got ourselves within the program of saying, now we're going to start working on a recovery in a very serious way. And that leads us to step two. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. At first, we knew life was unmanageable. We couldn't do it in of ourselves. And now we realize there's a power greater than us, or at least we believe there's a power greater than us that that can restore ourselves to sanity. That was one of the things, Sam, that really just was a struggle for me. I remember in rehab in 2017, it just hit me halfway through a program. I'm insane. So I don't know where you are, with your journey or where you come to, but once you get to that point, I mean, what are your thoughts once you got, okay, I realize life is unmanageable. I can't take it anymore. Now we're in this conversation with ourselves about who is this higher power? Is there one? And what do we do with it? What brought you now to step two? What were some of the first thoughts that you've had?
Yeah, I think I sure hope that there's somebody that can bring me back to sanity, because I feel the same. I feel insane and nothing really makes any sense anymore. So I think a higher power really does save us in the end. And I really appreciate that happening, because I don't know what would happen without that. And I do believe that the devil's part of addiction, and he's always testing us. So that's why in the darkness, asking God for help is really, and asking him for guidance every day really makes the difference.
So, yeah, and just a reminder, Sam is early in her new stage of recovery. And if you don't, I mean, obviously you've had a reoccurrence, and some of the work that you're doing has been pretty remarkable. She's been a couple months into her new work, and several months into her primary addiction of recovery, and with a secondary, a second substance as a diagnosis. She's working through that one well, and is several months down the road in that one as well. So your work is pretty remarkable. And what we're trying to do is just reflect and be, fellow travelers with the audience here to say these are some of the things we found. Now, the worksheet that we've been working on, it says we previously acknowledged that we cannot manage our lives. That does not mean that we can't be regained. Now, that was important for me, and that's something that was a realization well down the road, is that while I have to recognize the things that are uncontrollable and relinquish these things that are uncontrollable to my higher power, and there are certain things that I can control, even though the list is real small early on, I have to control those. But there's other things that are not controllable. I need to at least acknowledge that there is something out there that's of a higher power that can take these things that aren't controlled, but also recognize that that uncontrolled things can be regained, and oftentimes should be regained as we start to get our feet back underneath us. We can trust that a greater power can lead us to recovery, and we'll ask ourselves some probing questions into the spirituality. And that's what this episode is all about, is those probing questions about our spirituality. I guess, we'll start with, do you believe that there's an order of the universe, or events random? I guess, Sam, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't really believe that events are random. I think more that God has a plan for us. I do really believe that what you put into the universe comes back to you. So if you're always negative, and you're putting that negativity in the world, that's exactly what you're going to get back. And they've actually proved that somehow. I'm not sure how they prove that, but what you're putting into the universe is you get back equally. So I find that interesting. And so I think it's not really random events, but there's some kind of order to the universe. And if you're always angry or you think bad things about people, that's just the way it's going to be for you and what you get back. So I think there's some kind of order to it, and I think God does have some sort of plan for us.
Do you think so? You ended it kind of where I think we both sort of agree on that. I guess the reason why I'm reluctant to use the quote unquote universe is I feel like we use the universe as a way to just completely cut out, the notion of God. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the dirty subject of God and all this, because I think that we've gotten to a place of recovery that God has become almost taboo. We want to make sure that everybody, I believe in the spiritual component, has found an easier, softer way. That's one of the things we worry about and wonder, and we're warned about actually in 12-step programs, is that there is no easier, softer way. It is work. And to just know what the 12 steps are is so cliche. It's unbelievable. Sam and I are part of some programs that are loaded with people new to recovery, and they're all buzzword, junkies. But the thing is, when you get to the 12, and I don't mean junkie in a derogatory word, I'm just saying that's what we get addicted to, rather than actually doing the work of the 12 steps. And one thing I want to make sure I dispel right now, Sam is not new to recovery. She's just had a recent event that caused her to, have a reoccurrence. But she's been around you've been around the block a few times on the recovery journey, correct?
Yeah, I started getting really sober, or had long-term sobriety when my daughter died, or when I had my first daughter back 8 years ago.
Yeah. So, Sam has had some long-term sobriety, and then just, is now back on track here. But, this notion of universe, I think really just dumbs down and honestly gives us way too much power still, would be my argument on it. So one of the questions that we look at is, do you believe that there's an order to the universe and events are random? But I guess, how do we get to this place that's so taboo to give who the higher power is a name? I think that we make everything so soft that we don't really give ourselves accountability to actually having a spiritual entity that has a name. Now, on the flip side of that, I also would understand why our higher power has to be anything more powerful than us as we believe it at that point in our journey, because without having something that we believe is more powerful than us, then we really hope is gone. I would say so. I guess when you were growing up, I mean, one of the questions I think is interesting is that a lot of times, both good and bad, our preconceived notions about what the higher power is really based on our early on experiences with spirituality. What were yours, Sam? I mean, what was your experience relative to God and spiritual natures as a child, aside from addiction?
Growing up, we went to mass every Sunday, and I had religion class once a week every Tuesday. So it was present. Religion was present in our home. I think it was more based around that, like based around mass, and I don't know how much it was based around spirituality. I think it was a little different. It's just based around more of our the priest and the church.
How did you? I know that was the involvement you had, but how did you feel? I guess, how do you feel about that now? I mean, that those spiritual traditions that you grew up in, did it contribute to your addiction, or did it provide you aid and comfort?
I think God provided me with comfort even then, but just thinking about God and praying to God, it gave me comfort. Like, I would pray a lot as a child. Mm-hmm. So I think that helped, but not so much the church part of it kind of didn't help.
Yeah, my experience, I grew up around some Christian schools too growing up, and I went to two different churches that split. And so spirituality and religion, I think that we have we almost have viewed, at least in the recovery community from my observation, as we've considered spirituality as the word we use to address the fact that we can't stand religion. And we've associated that God is religion because religion is screwed up by men. I personally am not a religious zealot. I don't believe in the construct of religion as I've seen it play out. I've seen a lot of Catholicism and a lot of things related to that really is the hallmark of why people turn away from God altogether, because they talk about children being violated by priests. They talk about hypocrisy in the church. People, parse words with what the Bible says, and they look at the tools that are used, and everybody's taken these little pieces and experiences they've had and how that's played out negatively, possibly based on some bad actor within that program. And that's how they've determined who God is or is not. Personally, based on my experiences, I've come across many bad actors in these churches. In fact, I've been completely lost taste in religion because of what I've seen in humanity around it. I'm a sit in the back of the church kind of guy. I don't want to get too, I do go to church, but I don't want to sit too close to what the board is doing because I'll immediately lose taste. So for me, spirituality, religion, all of that has a name. And for me, it was God. So God did not lose power in my life because of a religious experience that I had, or a church experience I had, or somebody in my life saying they believed in God being an awful person. I saw all those things. But how is it that all these years later, I found resurrection and safety in a God? And I think it's interesting that with some of your experiences growing up, they really were, if I can say this correctly, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, they were also steps, but they were more like the rules of the road in terms of how you could be a good Catholic, not necessarily embracing the relationship with God. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. And especially when my mom was growing up, it was very strict Catholic for her, and the way her father raised her.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't, do anything wrong. And you can see in the way that my mom is today, why she is the way she is, because she was raised so strictly Catholic.
Right. Yeah. And doesn't it, I think a lot of times it makes it even harder for people to see, put a name on a higher power because of that. Many of us that have been immersed in those things growing up, we have such a distaste for it. I can think of being incarcerated and somebody handed me a Bible, and I've spoken on this show all the time. And in fact, I've still got it right here next to me. Whoops, bang the mic here. Almost knocked you on the floor, Sam. I know you can't see me, but it would have been a real tragedy. And right now I'm trying to dig through my pile of books here to make one really minor point. But here is the Bible that I was handed to me in jail that I still have right here. And I read it every morning as part of my flight plan for a day. And the reason I do that is because I found in that place, I had a distaste. In fact, the guy that handed it to me in the jail, interestingly enough, was part of one of those churches that split, that I had lost a massive distaste for what religion and God even brought to my life. So it was just weird that he was the one that got it brought to me by one of the COs, because he happened to be involved in some ministry in the jail I was in. So I find it interesting where we get to. Kind of moving along, what I guess we sort of touched on what role, spirituality plays in our life. I mean, for you, I guess, let's just say for this 24 hours, okay, you and I talked earlier today, and this day has presented some challenges. And if you just identified each individual challenge, people would say, well, it's not that big a deal. But if you look at the context of what you're living in right now and the things that you've been facing and are facing, these things layer up. So what role has spirituality or your higher power played in today's version of Sam's recovery?
A huge role. I think I still need it to play a bigger role, but I think it's playing a much bigger role in my life than it has in the past. And I think it's really, really important to my recovery now. And something I really wasn't doing as much before. And I think it was holding me back from staying sober in the past. But I think where else I can do better is doing the 12 steps with God, and getting a sponsor and all that. There's spirituality in that, and waking up every morning and praying to God and all that. But right now, spirituality plays a huge part.
Do you ever, one of the key questions of the work we're doing here is, do you ever feel anger for your higher power? I know for a fact I did. And I'll just give you a quick example. That, interestingly enough, it's a church that I gravitated back towards now that life has sort of come back together. I can remember, my parents very faithfully tried to keep me in a church environment as I was vacillating between my worst stages of my addiction. They were trying to help me get better. And I think a lot of the words I used to show my, show my sobriety or show my effort were all just, attempts to look like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. But the fact of the matter is anytime I could get my hands on a bottle, I would. But they were bringing me to church and, I was and at times I was vacillating between wanting to be there and not, but they would bring me to church. And I remember one day I just couldn't take it. And I don't know if it was because I was craving alcohol or was just so angry with what life had, but somebody was up in front of the church and I actually didn't give him a lot of credit for it. It was not the pastor, Sam, that you and I currently have today. This guy that was speaking, I knew his kid. I knew what his kid was up to. I felt like I was looking at another friggin' hypocrite, and he reminded me of a lot of the pastors that I didn't give a lot of credibility to growing up. In fact, most of them I didn't give credibility to, except for one, and he's long since passed. His name was Pastor Drake. But the rest of them I didn't even care. And this pastor, I won't name him, but his kid I knew was a disaster. I know his other kid had some mental health problems that cost her life. And here he is up here telling me about how, basically preaching at me about how to get beyond things. I'm sitting there looking at this guy going, listen, dude, you can't even keep your freaking house together. And you're telling a whole congregation of people how they got to live their life. I'm sitting here in absolute pain looking at, 7 years in prison. I can't seem to stop drinking. The charges are piling up. I've literally in the last week had even more charges piled on me. I've got a kitchen table full of paperwork with court appearances, literally between 4 county courts, 2 city courts, 2 traffic courts, and a family court. I mean, I got all this crap just piling up, and I got some guy up there telling me it's going to be okay. And I literally stood up with my mom and dad right next to me and said, fuck this, and walked out. And I just wasn't doing it. And I literally walked out and walked home. I wasn't putting up with it. I just couldn't take it. I was not going to hear this crap from somebody I didn't believe. And so I don't know that I was angry at my higher power. At that point in time, I wasn't really connected with God. But that guy, I wasn't signing up for that crap, So if that's how people feel and that's what they're viewing God is, it's not working out. And for the audience that's here, that are Christian in background and knowing that I'm a Christian, for me to say that on here probably offends you, but I can't. You're just gonna have to get over it. That's reality. That's how it was. So, why did I feel that? Well, was it justified? I don't know if it was justified, but that's how I felt. So I guess my question to you is, do you ever find yourself angry at your higher power?
Well, I think I had a similar experience to that in church one time too, and I felt like that. So, and sometimes, when things really just seem unfair and not right, it's hard not to ask why. And I think I still try to think, remember that it's, his will, not mine.
Are those words? But Sam, I want to push that a little bit just because I trust you. I think you're a wonderful person, obviously, and I love you tremendously. And I don't mean to gush all over you in front of everybody here, but I'm pushing you not in an antagonistic way. But that what you just said was almost cliche. I know it's from the Bible, but his will, not mine. How does that play out? Or is that just a Band-Aid you do to say, man, I hope this works out? Does that really cause you comfort?
I don't know. Sometimes when there's no, I can't get an answer to something that I'm worried about right now.
So it's a way. So that sounds like maybe it's a mechanism for you to manage that controllable thing. Maybe that's your way that you don't even understand how this uncontrollable thing is. I'm putting words in your mouth, so I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. Please correct me. I'm just saying how I hear it, and what I hear is sounds like a mechanism that you're using to transfer something that you feel like you've got no power over to your higher power, hoping it works out. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair.
So do you feel that in those, it sounds like maybe that was through experience that you've learned to react that way?
Yeah.
Do you ever see that play out more positively by doing it that way versus the Chris train wreck that stands up in the middle of church and uses the F-bomb and walks out?
Yeah, sometimes. Okay.
So I think that's a fair answer, honestly. Because if you sat here as an authority saying, I always do this, it always works out, I'd probably say that's not true. Because I think that that's authentic. I think that's you're speaking as me and the audience, as all of us as fellow travelers. That's the actuality of it. It fluctuates, We don't hold, we're human beings, we're flawed. That's why this is not a perfect journey. And we have to just keep moving forward with the principles we know that are true. Keep engaging in those. Sometimes we don't have as much faith as we normally would. So I find that that's, I think, a very good response, and honestly hit home with me. You know, one of the questions they asked too is, have you ever prayed to a higher power in moments of distress? So have you ever found yourself not like when you're hungover and you're puking in the toilet saying, God, I'll never do, if you please stop this vomiting, I'll never do this again. not the teenage hangover prayer, but you know, have you ever prayed in the moments of distress, and why?
Yes, I definitely have. I think a lot of times I would be praying to him most in distress when I wasn't being as spiritual as I should have been. And that's when it would come up the most. And instead of praying during times when things were good, when I should be praying, you know, all the time, it shouldn't just be when I need his help. But it does when I have no one else to turn to. I think I do pray to him then. And yeah, I think it's when I feel scared and distressed. I think that's why.
Yeah, man, that's so true. And I didn't actually have this note in here, but this is true for me. I've said this on the show before. My most dangerous days are when things are going well. I will blow that sucker up so friggin' fast because I don't pray at all. I don't think, and that's why I really have to force myself. I just showed everybody this Bible like I'm, you know, like a used car salesman over here. I got a Bible on my desk, but no, the thing is like I do in good days just don't, you know, I mean, there's no reason to, everything's just going fine. And I forget that's actually the most important time, because those are the times you should be growing, because there is inevitably going to be some other calamity come, whether I'm doing anything wrong or not, it still comes, you know. How does it make you feel when you do it, Sam?
When I pray?
When you pray in moments of distress?
It usually helps.
In those moments, do you find yourself making deals and bargains at all?
Those I don't think I usually make bargains unless it's during when I'm feeling sick. I'd say.
Yeah, I feel you. That's usually when you're going through withdrawal or something, probably.
Yeah.
I've actually heard you pray in withdrawal, so I know you're. if you told me no, I'd say bullshit. Because I've heard you actually repeatedly praying out loud, God help me, God help me, God help me. I mean, you've had some pretty awful withdrawals, and I'm not making light of it, but you know.
Yeah.
So so with that, I think it's fair to say that both of us, I know for sure, I most of the times I pray most rigorously is when things are going horribly. And I actually do find peace in it, because I find in those places that my own arrogance and my own self-power, I truly believe is gone. Like I don't have any solutions. So by giving it over, I at least feel like in that situation, I've got some opportunity to get out of this mess. You know, I guess what characteristics does your higher power have?
I think he has unconditional love, and he doesn't judge. I feel like I need that most because I find stigma everywhere and hatred. And I hate it, like with the paramedics when I needed to go to the hospital that day. And
yep.
That's just what I want most out of God. So that's all I said for that.
That you just brushed over a pretty powerful moment, actually. And I want to, if you don't mind, can I dig into that a little bit?
Yeah.
All right. So Sam's describing a situation where she was literally calling out to God. Now I was joking a little bit about, I actually did think about this circumstance, but we find people treat us like garbage when we're at our worst, especially as addicts, because it's just like they treat you like you did this to yourself. In this case, Sam was paralyzed from the waist down. I had found her downstairs in bed. She was going through what was precipitated withdrawal, but it was definitely exacerbated by the fact that she had consumed some alcohol to deal with the withdrawal pains, and it really almost killed her. And she was not being heard by the paramedics. I found her downstairs, and I won't get into the details of the scene, but it was pretty awful and pretty traumatizing. And honestly, for me, one of those moments that I really struggle with when I think about it. It makes me very sad, sick, scared, upset, all these things. It was a horrible experience that day with that what Sam was going through. Because there's a woman I love, by her profession and mine as well, I think she's dying. So I'm calling the EMT. It wasn't an overdose. It was because of her medication, that if you too soon after your last use take this medication, it sends you in precipitated withdrawal. But that's a horrible experience. You won't die from it, but it's a horrible experience. The problem is she introduced another substance to ease that, and that could have killed her. And by all intents and purposes, she was in that place. The EMTs were not taking us seriously and would not listen to anything. In fact, they had law enforcement come in the house first, which was ridiculous, and quarantine me into a bathroom. I've talked about this scene on here, and I'm very irritated by the whole thing. But in that case, Sam was calling out to her higher power because nothing else was working. And these EMTs were literally swearing at her, telling her to shut the F up. That's what people were doing to her. Sam has a long history of trauma, and these people that were supposed to be helping her were saying these things to her, and I couldn't stop them because I've got 2 cops over there with me. She ended up by calling out her higher power in that most desperate situation to find some peace. Now, thank God, lo and behold, all these months later, she did survive that incident, obviously, or I'm talking to a ghost right now. But, she had some medical work done the other day, and the blood work showed, she saw the blood work from that night, and the hospital just discharged her with blood work that was absolutely, her body had been through serious distress. I mean, she was literally on the cusp of dying, and people just treated her like a junkie. And so in those places, when we call on our higher power, there is some peace. And I certainly did. I was asking them to heal Sam, and they wouldn't even call. She was calling for me repeatedly, and they wouldn't let me in. It was just a horrible scene. But in those places, definitely in desperation, there's no shame in calling on God in your most desperate situations. That is not what we're suggesting, and neither does step 2. It's just saying that is the acknowledgement that because of step 1, we were powerless. Our life is unmanageable. We can't take it anymore. Step 2 says, there is a God, or there is a higher power. And I think that what I want to do is get to the point of, I think obviously, Sam, your higher power has a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for this audience, my higher power has a name too. And for me, it's God. And regardless of how we describe our story, mine is a God of salvation. And I believe in one way to heaven. And I believe that is through salvation and acknowledgement that God gave his son to die. And that was for sin that I had. Long before I was even born, he knew my name. And so long before Sam was born, he knew her name. And we both share that belief. And so he knew my name first, and I learned who his name was later through all kinds of crap that I put my own self through. So we get to this place now, Sam, and we're around the recovery rooms. We're about 28 minutes here, and we want to keep these somewhat short for people. But, what is the value of you knowing that your higher power is not a crystal or a rock or an idea, but is there value in you knowing who it is and that it is a who?
I think there's a ton of value in that. It's, there's not a question. Like I always wanted to know, like, to have proof of it, in my hands, like, like if something happened, like someone murdered someone, I would want like exact proof of that before I ever made a judgment. So I always would kind of, think that there was a God, or think, I just wasn't so sure, because I just wanted the evidence of it. But I've realized, over time, that I'm sure that there is, and that's just how I feel about it. A lot of times I've realized that because you can't have light without darkness, and
you said that before.
I have the evidence of the darkness. I've been there. Yeah. And I'm starting to have the evidence too of the lightness myself too. So it is there.
To me, Sam, your evidence of God is where I'd lost sight of a lot of things over time. You're the evidence of a miracle for me. I don't know that I've said this enough to you, but the progress that's been going on in your life has demonstrated for me one more time that I'm in control of nothing, and that you aren't either, that God actually really is present in both of our lives. We just had it happen 2 days ago. There's a circumstance that arose immediately after we thought we had dealt with one other thing, and somebody else came in and started some crap in our life. And without God, there's no chance we could have known that was coming and had it solved. The issue, God went before us to the point, and I won't get into the details of it because of some of the ramifications, but we had a problem that was solved before we were even presented with the problem. That's how involved our higher power is in our current situation. And it was a significant problem, and it was already solved because of the morning before, and we had no clue how significant it was, just based on one piece of documentation that came across and was interpreted to me in a separate situation altogether, solved this problem before it even came. Now, prior to that, if we were just doing it on our own, there's no chance we would have ever been prepared for that. And so those are pieces of evidence that for me really make this profound, especially when I look at the baffling nature of where things were 3 months ago versus where they are now in our lives, and the real potential for a relatively reasonable outcome for everything. And it really boils down to the fact, I think, that both of us humbled ourselves before a God that we said that we believe in, and both of us took our recovery journeys very seriously and committed to those for ourselves, and collectively it seems to be helping all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we close this out on step 2, I mean, is there anything else relative to step 2 that's really hit home for you? Because keep in mind where we are in context. Step 1 says we're powerless. I keep saying this, but I want to make sure we stay in context to where we are. Step 1 says, man, I can't take this. I got to figure out this crossroads. We were at a crossroads. Something had to stop. And we decided to enter this program. We realized that we were powerless. And step 2 says there is a higher power out there. And for Sam and I, we believe it's God. Keep it in context. Step 3 says we're going to turn it over to him. And that's the most powerful reason why we even need to know who our higher power is in step 2. So Sam, what are your thoughts relative to step 2 as we close this out?
I just think there's a huge part to every step in it. And sorry, my alarm went off. I think every step helps in it, and I think you grow through every step. It's really important to do every step thoroughly. And like step 3 is important. That's why you got to do step 1 first, and then handing it over to God in step 3. I just think it's really important, and it works for a reason. It's the only thing that we know for sure works. There's not just a magical pill. So,
well, those magical pills got us here.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Well, I appreciate this, Sam, doing this. You agreeing to do signature moments, even in the situation you're in right now, because I think that for me, it's beneficial. I'm learning a lot from you, and I'm hoping the audience is also realizing the conversations that Sam and I are having. This really is our life. We decided to add on to Kristen Retro here and do this on Sundays when she's got an ability to do it. So I appreciate you coming on here. I guess I'll leave with this, and this is I hope it doesn't alienate those that aren't signed up for the God concept yet. That's fine. We're all in different journeys, and you don't even have to believe in God to get better. You can still get better. You can still have a higher power that may not be God. Maybe you don't. Maybe someday you will believe it's God, but right now you don't. But you do have to have a higher power, because you got to transition these things that when your life is unmanageable, you cannot do it alone. It's going to take something of a spiritual nature to help you get beyond this place, because keep in mind, it's 2 pieces, or it's actually 3 pieces, really. It's your spiritual nature, it's your physical action, and it's also your medical condition. These are all things that all have to be dealt with. And step 1 is your first step into it. So for us though, and at least for me, I believe if I can't name my higher power, I don't have one. So if you at least are naming what your higher power is, give yourself at least that opportunity for success. It doesn't have to be God, but at least know what it is. Because a critical piece of our recovery is turning over these things that we cannot control to our higher power. So if you haven't even decided who that is, then you're toast right out of the gate. I couldn't be more passionate about any part of this. For me, I'm fortunate that I believe for sure that my higher power is God. And based on the evidence that I've seen in my life and in Sam's life, he's real, and he's delivering in our life in a significant way. Guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Share the content of this with somebody that might be working through their steps, or maybe struggling with addiction, or even a family member just trying to understand a good process for working through it. Sam and I do not have all the answers, and the things that we're sharing may not be perfect. And you might not even agree with everything here. It's just like going into a meeting. You don't have to agree with everything that everybody says, but we're hoping you take at least something from what we're talking about here and help you work through your journey, even if it is just the notion of asking yourself some tough questions and actually working the steps out for you, and as imperfect as we are, to find a way to have a sober life in your world, or as you're dealing with somebody else that's struggling. Thanks again. Between now and the next time we talk, Sam and I are going to stay out of trouble, and I hope you do too.